Okay, I think we're going to give our fifth member just another minute or two. He was finishing up a phone call, said he should be here in just a moment. So if y'all bear with us just another couple of minutes. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. Representative Lim will be coming in just a few moments. To start us off, I'd like to recognize Representative Huddleston to open us with a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, just thank this day, Lord. Thank for all the great things you do, Lord. Just lead, guide, and direct us in every way. Allow us to be your example, and Lord, just allow us to make the decisions that we need to make each and every day to be that example. And if you will, just thank us again and keep us safe within our travels. In your name I pray. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, everybody. This is the House Study Committee on Safety and Consumer Protection in the Tree Care Industry. I appreciate everybody's involvement to this point. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to have two of our meetings, but that was due to the storms that came through Georgia and then in Florida. And many of the people that were scheduled to speak and be involved with those two meetings were kind of busy at that time. So we understand that and recognize their efforts and appreciate all that was going on at that time by everybody involved with the storm restoration and cleanup, and is still going on in some of the areas. So this will be our last hearing that we'll have. We're going to work with the Speaker's office, try to figure out the best time to have a final meeting of some type so that the committee can review a proposed final draft of a report that we're going to be coming up with here in the next week or so. So with that, just real quickly, I'm going to allow the committee members to introduce themselves, and we'll start down at the end down here with Representative Ridley.
I'm Representative Jordan Ridley. I represent Southwest Cherokee, North Cobb, and the Lake Allatoona area.
I'm Representative Bill Yurda. I'm from District 152. I represent Worth, Lee, and a portion of Daugherty County.
David Huddleston, District 72, which consists of Carroll, Heard, and Troup counties in the West Georgia area.
And I am Representative Victor Anderson. I'm chairing this study committee. I represent District 10, which is most of Habersham and all of Rabun counties. We also have on our committee Representative Marvin Lim from Gwinnett County, and he should be rolling in here in a few minutes. So we'll look forward to him participating in the rest of our meeting also. We do have a sort of an agenda put together, but it's going to be flexible as we have some people who are on some timing issues. So we're going to allow presentations to go as needed, And I would ask everybody to, share as much information as you'd like for the committee for us to consider in this process. But we, would appreciate brevity and conciseness if possible. So thank you all, and we're going to start by recognizing our friends from Georgia Power. If you'd like to come up to the podium or the table, whichever is better, the podium, let's see. Do we know if the PowerPoint is...
Okay, you guys ready?
But before you start, if I don't mind, just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what your capacity is, and committee members, you should have a hard copy of the PowerPoint because we don't have a screen we can see from here. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, yeah, good afternoon. My name is Dan Buer. I work for Georgia Power and I lead the vegetation management work. And I'm going to explain a little bit about that, but I lead that for the company. I've been with the company about 33 years. I'm a forester by trade, but at the company I've done a number of different things. So, all right, well, at first I kind of wanted to educate y'all on what Georgia Power does as it relates to tree care. I mean, we're probably I would consider us a large institutional, relatively sophisticated buyer of those type of services. We use a lot of tree crews throughout the state to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And we have to keep trees and limbs and vegetation out of our power lines. I mean, we essentially trim to keep the lights on. So we also have some compliance concerns through the federal government, where on our high voltage system, the government will not tolerate vegetation encroaching on our conductors. But outside of that, it's really about reliability for our customers and the safety of our system. Our system is about 50,000 miles of linear assets. It's transmission lines, it's distribution lines, it's in virtually every county of the state. And so it's a pretty big job to keep vegetation out of it, particularly in a state like Georgia. The workforce varies, but it's between 500 and 1,000 contract personnel at any given time. They're working from St. Mary's to Trenton. I mean, we've got line and work all over the territory. And we use a professional staff of arborists and foresters and other disciplines to oversee the work. And those are our employees. And they maintain some credentials that are important to the tree care industry, such as certified arborists and certified utility specialists through the International Society of Arboriculture, pesticide applicators, licenses, things like that. So, the mechanics of what we do is we trim trees, we prune to get clearance. We do removals of hazardous trees. I mean, it's a lot like what you would see in a residential or consumer environment. But we also have some specialty work. We use a lot of herbicides for the floor of our right-of-ways. We do mowing. We do a lot of looking because with 50,000 miles of assets, it's hard to kind of know what's going on. Where are emergent threats? Vegetation is very dynamic, and it's a lot of ground to cover. So we use things like satellites. We use aerial patrols, that sort of thing. A lot of our work is planned, but a lot of it is reactive. We learn of a condition that needs to be addressed, and we go address it. Another big part, I'd just be remiss if I didn't put it in here, it may not pertain to your issue, but we communicate with our customers. Because if we're showing up in their yard and on their property or in their backyard, we're going to let them know what we're doing, and we don't want them to be surprised at our work. Initial clearing for new right-of-ways is a part of what we do, because if we build a new line, we've got to take the vegetation out. And then, as you referenced, sir, storms and trouble, such as recent event with Hurricane Helene, we had over 5,700 vegetation workers in the state helping us get things back normal. So just kind of our general approach to making the work safe and accomplishing our goals and it being effective is, one, we're looking at who do we do business with. We're pretty rigorous about the qualification and selection of our vendors. Once we get that suite of vendors, robust contract terms, because we want to set expectations, we want to hold them accountable to do what's right. And then we have our team that oversees that work, so we inspect what we expect, and we, manage that work on an ongoing basis. And I understand that may not be what a homeowner is able to do, but hopefully the principles are informative to you. So contractor qualification, we do competitively source the work. We learn a lot about our vendors. Typically, they're going to have experience with other utilities. Some of them are national in scale. Some of them are more or less local. So they range from very small companies to very large companies. And as we get to know them, we do a lot of due diligence. We understand their work history, through references or other projects or other capabilities. There's a metric that's fairly important to us in the insurance industry called EMR, experience modification rate, that it represents kind of the risk that a company presents to the insurance provider, to the underwriter. So we tag that as a pretty key indicator. We ask about their OSHA logs and if they've had any kind of typically they will have some reportables just through injuries, but if they've had any citations, that's a big concern. We also verify or ask about their employer law compliance with I-9 and E-Verify processes to make sure the workers should be here and are done, or that the workers are brought here lawfully. We look at the financial position of the company, because if a company is about to hit bankruptcy or having some credit worthiness issues, they're probably not a good candidate for us or for our customers. We will also look in some detail, and it varies, what are their documented safety plans and training programs. And then we will sometimes go visit the work in progress that they have for other customers. So it's a selection process that it takes some time, and a lot of our vendors are recurring. Once we have them on our system, we don't need to do that. It's more of a monitoring thing. But any new provider, and we get questions probably every week, somebody knocking on our door wanting to do business with us, they're going to be subjected to this review. And we're going to make sure they are qualified to do the work that we need them to do. And as you probably understand, working around trees and power lines is a unique set of dangers, and so we have to be real diligent that they're ready and able to do that work. And I won't go through every bit of this, but we do put a lot of the onus for training and worker qualification on the contractor. Contract spells it out, and we'll verify it, but they've got to do the selection of their employees. They've got to train their employees, but we will supplement. We will, if we deem an employee to not be qualified, we'll take them off our system. All of our contracts provide the right to reject anybody we see as unfit. We don't get right into their training, but we do set our expectations around what we need as far as a job. We have specifications, we have policies, protocols, and one of the key things for us is that every crew, every group of workers has to have supervision. We have to be able to reach a leader in that company and communicate our needs and our requirements and our feedback. So all that's kind of laid out here in a little bit more prose. But and in our business, we do, in our contracts, we reference some standards that are important to our business. The National Electric Safety Code talks about vegetation management. It deals with a whole host of issues related to utilities, but it does have clearance requirements and things that need to be abided by for the electrical line clearance worker. Now, one that's probably universal is for tree care is ANSI A300. It's a standard for quality of work and for pruning, proper care and management of trees. Also applicable to really anybody in this business would be ANSI Z133, and it's a safety standard for arboricultural operations. And it speaks somewhat to the electrical hazards that are present And really, anybody doing tree work needs to have some knowledge of electrical hazards because they need to know what to avoid. Now, they can't get close to our lines without some proper training and qualification. But electrical hazard awareness training really is needed for anybody working aloft around properties that have electric power. There's an OSHA standard 1910-269 that really sets a lot of the requirements for electrical workers. It touches on line clearance tree trimming, and we reference that in our contracts as well. Any kind of federal, state, local rules we would obviously abide by, and then we have our own sets of policies and procedures and documents that we incorporate into those contracts. So, the contracts are thick, and they are intended to have teeth in them so that we can get what we need to get. One of the things we require is insurance, and you see what they are here. The coverages are generally, they will vary, but they're generally in the millions of dollars. General liability, workers' comp, automotive, and then professional liability or errors and omissions depending on what the scope of the work is. A lot of the companies may also help plan work, or in addition to just running the saw, they may help plan or analyze work or quality control work for us too. And then I mentioned the team of predominantly arborists. We're always out there managing that work. We're looking at the work through job site visits. We're auditing and inspecting and documenting that. We look at the quality of the work behind the crews. So it may be days or weeks after, but we're going to go look at it. We're going to ensure it meets our expectations. We have feedback loops, so we inform the contractor management of what we're seeing, what we like, what we don't like. And, there's accountability there. So we're holding payment if the job's not met, or we may ask for some remediation work to be done or an action plan. If say we have a series of safety events, we may expect a response plan to address that before we continue work. And one theme that we have is we just have multiple suppliers. Any given area of the state is going to have more than one company helping us, because that competition creates some positive. It also gives us optionality, so that's just, I guess that we find that it's helpful, in our context, to have lots of options. And that's really what I got for you. I know that was short. I'm certainly available to answer any kind of questions you have. So I'll just stop for a moment and let you guys respond.
Okay, thank you. And first of all, we'll thank you very much for the presentation. It was short, but it was spot on. A lot of what Georgia Power Company and our utilities as a whole in Georgia are doing kind of, in a way, follow what we're concerned with and looking at, because the dangers are there all through the process. Let me recognize, okay, I'll recognize Representative Huddleston first.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. I guess a question, going back to the storm damage, like so Hurricane Helene and all the previous storms there. You said you brought in about 5,700 other individuals, to help with a cleanup. I guess because I'd asked a question in one of the last meetings, basically, what's the percentage of in-state that was helping, and did you bring any out-of-state contractors in to assist in that cleanup? If so, do you have kind of a pre-approved list of the due diligence of your contractors that you're able to use, or is that somehow you kind of overlook, work around that to get enough workers?
Yeah, thank you for that. So the 5,700 was the total number, and probably native, we would have had about 800 or 900. So we imported, the difference. It's a little bit of everything when we get to that magnitude. So where they came from could have been in-state or out-of-state. We had companies coming from very far away assisting us. Typically, they would already be in the utility business. We're not picking up Bob's Tree Service here in Norcross to go down to Augusta or go over to Augusta to help us. So it's just not the labor pool we're looking for. We do, as much as we can, have contracts in place ahead of time. So when we're not doing storm, we're looking at vendors, and we may sign agreements just for that contingency. In this particular case, we had to go beyond the capacity that those contracts offered. So we had to kind of on the fly do some of that. One of the ways we did that is there's a mutual exchange, a utility. It's called the Southeastern Electric Exchange, and we provide mutual assistance to each other. So it's other companies. It's probably 40 different investor-owned utilities that offer their contractors and offer their personnel, in these times. So a lot of it came from there. And then some of it we just, we kind of made a match, and we tried to get the contract settled on their way. That didn't always happen. Some of the contracts were done in retrospect. But generally we had some reason to believe they were in our business, and they had existing business with a utility. And once we get them here, we also go through an onboarding to communicate the requirements that OSHA would have us to transmit, such as the voltages they'll be working around and any kind of special procedures. And then we watch them, and it's unfortunately it's not uncommon that we dismiss some because they just weren't what we thought they were. So, and that's where that team of 40, we had to expand that as well. We had to have more oversight. We had to enlist people who may not normally be in the vegetation world, or we had to hire contractors who consulted with us to actually come and oversee the imported workers.
Okay, Chairman Yurda?
Thank you. I appreciate you being with us today. And mine's kind of storm related also. And gosh, I think y'all said y'all had 1,000 miles of lines that were down, and certainly unprecedented damage in the state of Georgia. And frankly, I think y'all did an admirable job getting folks back online, considering the damage, and other utilities in Georgia as well. My question is, with the severity of that storm and just storms making unprecedented, ventures into Georgia, does that change anything as far as your tree trimming, or do you get more aggressive, or have y'all talked about doing that, or what?
Well, we are always trying to leverage our tree trimming program for the benefit of our customers. I mean, a lot of it is maintenance, and it's not
right.
necessarily improving things. We do have some targeted programs to try to improve reliability where we've had just a lot of outages, and it's tree related. And so we do have a program where we go out and buy wider easements and purchase the trees and get better clearance around our lines. It's probably more for the day-to-day experience of our customers rather than catastrophic events, but it would help in those events as well. So and we try to stay current with our program. We try to see hazards and deal with them, but specifically to sort of hurricane proof or make the system better, I don't think our program's really designed for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I have a quick question, and then we'll see if there's any further questions of the committee. But you had mentioned the fact that I think that your department deals with herbicide application contractors, that sort of thing. Are there other trades that you deal with that may have more either industry, state, or federal recognized credentials, licensing, that sort of thing, that come into play in vetting those contractors?
Well, for any herbicide work, they've obviously got to be a licensed applicator, like you referenced. Some of our staff will have registered forester if they have that degree and they've been with us, they will obtain the registered forester certification. But in terms of our vendors, I can't really think of any kind of standard credential they would have to bring in order to work with us. a lot of these companies self-certify in terms of their capabilities of the work. They all have to bring insurance, so somebody's willing to underwrite them. I mean, that says something. There is an organization called Tree Care Industry of America, I think, or Tree Care, am I right? Okay, TCIA. And they offer some credentialing. They offer some around line clearance and also some safety credentials, like safety professional type stuff. And I think they offer several.
Chipper shredder.
Yeah. I mean, a number. Right, but we don't require those.
Gotcha.
They might be of value in some other environments, but they are not ones that we require. Thank
Okay.
you for the help.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, Mr. Bureau, thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Okay, and the voice you heard was the voice of Mr. Richard Littleton. Richard, if you'd like to join us at the podium.
Sure.
Just give an introduction to the committee, please, sir.
I'm Richard Littleton. I'm a state arborist and agronomist manager with GDOT. We only have 2 positions in the state. That I have the north half of the state and got a counterpart works the lower half. But a lot of the things that they do for their contract underwriting, we do very similar. So we're doing it for highways instead of for power lines. And our purpose is for highway safety, of course. It's also for trying to keep the vegetation off of the highways because moisture and asphalt does not perform well. So we try to keep the clearance off of that. Also clear zones for cars that may veer off the side of the highway. We don't always do the best job, but we've got like 750 something thousand acres of in our right of ways, and that's a lot of places to be and a lot of things to keep up with. As far as our contractors are concerned, we underwrite our contractors, we approve them, and they get on an approval list, and then when there's something that comes up for a bid, then they can bid out for the particular scope of work for whatever contract. So one of the things, I appreciate y'all looking into this. This is really good to look at it. But as far as our side, we do, and the power companies, we do a lot of underwriting ourselves. And actually, it'd probably be more stringent than probably what y'all's requirements will be. But anyway, we get those approved, and then they bid on a contract. And in our case, our procurement is, they're looking for the least expensive contractor. So having some standardized training skills will help us in that bid process as far as state contractors are concerned. You won't have just, like some have said, somebody's got a chainsaw and a pickup truck and they're out there, cutting. So this will raise those standards of who can bid on the state jobs for vegetation removal and things. And that's important because we have, I don't know if you've seen from time to time, you'll see a lot of trees lying on the side of the road, and you'll see them there and you'll see them there, and you'll wonder, well, what's happened? Well, probably what happened is we had a contractor that pretty much met all the qualifications, but they hadn't had a lot of experience. So they bid on the job, and they get out there and start doing the job, and the job's not what they expected. And so they walk off the job. Then we have to go through a whole new process again to get that taken care of and get a new contractor to remove those trees. And so it takes time to get all that to take place. Now, as far as the whole industry, consistency of safety and so forth is a tremendous need. The licensing procedures and things, as long as it's consistent, and to me, if it could have some teeth in it with requiring training, just to have a licensing procedure is good as far as helping with consistency, but having some training requirements tied to that would be very, very helpful for the entire industry. And there's several different ways that you could look at it. The ANSI Z133 that Mr. Byer mentioned is a safety protocol that's national standards, and a lot of federal, state, and municipal folks use those in drafting regulations for whatever they may be trying to set up for their individual state. Also, with the as far as credentialing, Georgia Department of Agriculture, for your pesticide license, you have to take a principal core exam for that, and then you have all these different writers for a specialized area. You can have it for right-of-way, you can have it for agriculture, forestry, aquatics, and different things. So not only do they have to have an overall comprehensive training and understanding of the core use of pesticides, then they test in a particular section. So we require them to have that license or whatever through the Georgia Department of Agriculture, because we do apply herbicides to some of these trees that they cut, try to prevent regrowth and things such as that. And also in vegetation removals, we're trying to keep all that mess from growing back on the side of the highways. The Georgia Arborist Association, where you get your arborist certifications, you have a core exam that you take through them. You have to meet certain parameters. You got to be like in the tree industry for like 10 years. You got to have several things before you can even sit for the exam, take the arborist exam. They have things for tree climbers. They have it for aerial lift. They have it for the electrical side of things. They have those specialized additional certifications you can get. They even have tree risk assessment certifications. And those are helpful. One thing I've seen through my studies of testing and everything is there's not a whole lot of required training that I've seen in the area of operating chainsaws, operating chipper shredders, a lot of rigging necessarily. There's a good bit of that, but a lot of the accidents come from the chainsaws and the falls from trees and cranes. Crane operators not operating the cranes correctly. So if if either the TCIA could come up with some additional training, or if the Georgia Arborists or the International Society of Arboriculture or even the Georgia Arborists Association could get some specialized training, some of these areas that our contractors could train their people in, would be very, very beneficial. One question to ask is if you are, say for instance, you've got a barber that needs a license, you got a plumber, you got an electrician, you got a cosmetologist or somebody, they have to have individual license to do whatever they're doing, because there are certain things that are critical on a day-to-day individual basis that they need to be careful of. And same thing with these tree worker folks. They have specific things that they need to be careful of, like your riggers, your tree climbers, your chainsaw folks, and all of those fall under the heading of a company. So just to have maybe one in the whole company that's trained, I don't know if that always gets out to the individual crews as it should. And there needs to be more of that. At least like with the Georgia pesticide license, you have to have a commercial license to operate. You have to have a commercial applicator's license. Then you have to have a commercial applicator at each separate office that contractor has. So in essence, they really need somebody on site, whether it be an arborist, it be a pesticide applicator, or a safety person, that's, if they're not over or on that crew, they should be looking. There shouldn't be tons of crews that they're looking at, because they can't get around and see the things that they need to see as far as that's concerned. Another program that's offered through the University of Georgia is a Georgia Landscape Professional. And I got that certification a few years ago, and that was a very comprehensive certification. Has like 4 written exams, and then it's got 8 hands-on stations that you work at. But having something like that the company themselves get certified in. You know, they go through a core training, maybe whatever different areas, and then they also have these workstations that they go through for like safety, equipment operation. So you have one primary person in the company, usually the owner or manager or whoever that is responsible for all that, making sure it takes place in that company. That's very helpful, and then they can designate people under them to look out for the other stuff. As far as some of the studies that's been done, I would have liked to have seen maybe this go out more to the International Society of Arboriculture for a survey to go to all the arborists in Georgia, because there's a lot of them, and their input in this would have been beneficial and probably provide additional things that you would need in your decision making. So there's a lot involved with like the power companies and the right-of-ways, and we take like the herbicide or the pesticide license, we got specialized training in that, the arborist certifications, and we have those people on staff that work for GDOT, and if it's not me, it's others in our districts that have that. And so again, thank you for looking and trying to make this a more consistent process overall. It's necessary for the industry. I hope that the structure that is set up is not so stringent that it drives up cost, but it gets the safety out there that you need. Because if any of you have ever had to have a tree removed out of your yard, it's astronomical what that is. So the more we can keep that price reasonable, the better. So in your adding more of this, more of that, that can add to the cost of that process. And there's a lot of elderly people and a lot of less income folks that just can't afford that. So in the process, I agree wholeheartedly. The training is needed, needs to be consistent. It'd be a great benefit for not only the workers, but also for the residential folks. And so just a lot of things to keep in mind here, and any way that I can help you in further decisions or questions, I'll be glad to do so. I'm sure Georgia Power will also. Thank you for the time today. We appreciate what you're doing on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Littleton. Before you leave there, do we have any questions on the part of the committee? Representative Lim.
Thank you for your presentation. I learned a lot from it. A couple questions. One is, are most of these contracts for tree care for you all, are they mostly competitively bid? And then the second question is, you mentioned earlier there are sometimes where you find out after someone's already gotten a contract that they don't have the right experience. Is that because people exaggerate about their qualifications? Is it because in many instances you just don't know the scope of the work until you start it? And most importantly, is that problem the type of thing that would be resolved by better licensing?
Generally, the reason you have that, they usually have the arbor certification. They have all the things that they meet the checks on the checkoff sheet. And then the bidding, we try to look and see how long they've been doing this kind of work to see if they even know what they're doing. We even look at their number of people, number of the amount of equipment they have, and so forth. But a lot of them that just don't have the experience to know what's involved, or they bite off more than chew, as you might say. And they get out there and they say, well, this is way more than what I'm barking for. And the state contracts are not always the most lucrative either. So you got to be very careful in your profit estimates and things for bidding on that. And some of them just don't get it right. They get out there and find that out, and then they move on because they can't do it. They can't meet those obligations. Does that help?
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Littleton? All right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Next, I'd like to, if we could, ask Mr. Tierson Boutte from the Georgians for a Safer Tree Industry to step to the podium. The committee, all the committee members have a copy of a document that Mr. Boutte had sent to us earlier that kind of outlines I'll let you describe what it outlines. How about that, Tierson?
All right, sure. Nice to see all you guys again. Thanks to everybody here for coming. And Victor tasked me with doing a quick rundown of the proposed rules. And before I do that, I'll just say that these rules are really based on the pesticide applicator law that has already worked pretty well in the state of Georgia to address similar issues in that industry. That industry does not have as great of a safety concern, although it does have that because of the chemicals they deal with, but it has a real consumer concern. And that consumer concern can turn into a safety issue for consumers. So it's a little different, but it's very similar law. And what we were interested in was trying to find a structure of a law that would work and would address the concerns like that you mentioned, Mr. Littleton, where you have a law that's really onerous and stifles competition. So that was the idea, was to try to use something that's been used before successfully in Georgia. All right, so you guys want to go through this, huh? All right. So page 1 starts with administration, and we wrote the Commission of Agriculture because that's just the commission that was in charge of the pesticide applicators law. You guys just stop me if you have any thoughts. I mean, it goes through a whole list of terms and definitions, and if you guys want to ask about those, you can, but I think maybe the most important ones are on page 3, where it talks about the 4 different kinds of operations. And Dan Beer was mentioning, hey, sometimes we bring in consultants and sometimes we spray stuff on the ground, and then most of the time we cut things. And so those are the 3 basic categories that we deal with, is consultants, spraying, and cutting. And I'd say cutting's 90% of it. But what we're trying to do here is exclude the loggers, exclude the bulldozer operators that clear land with bulldozers and other equipment. I've tried to define it using words that really describe our industry. So you'll see in subsection 14 it says tree care operations means arboricultural activities, and that there's 3 different kinds. And that's specifically clearing and grubbing, landscaping, and logging are exempt. So what is general tree care? That's the cutting part. That's the intention there, is to focus in on anything that involves climbing, cranes. If you're going to take a piece of equipment and cut a tree in multiple sections in the air, it's considered arboriculture. If you're going to push it over at the ground, it's not. Or you may cut it at the ground with like a track cutter, or what some people call a feller buncher. All those are logging tools, so we're not trying to regulate any of that. We're trying to focus on the trade of arboriculture. Then tree care health operations, has to do with all the different chemicals we use to treat the tree. So if the chemical goes into the tree to change the tree, then we would consider that to be part of it. And then for consulting, we're just talking about people that are charging somebody for the advice about trees. So, if I'm a tree cutter and I go out and I say, well, I think you ought to cut this tree down, that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about if I charge you money for that advice. So those are the 3 areas that we feel like is logical to consider in our industry. There's some more definitions there about suspension and revocation. And I'm not a lawyer, but I just basically tried to use the same terms that had been used before in other laws. If you look on the page, you guys with me so far? Okay. So the next part is applicability. It's really important that we specifically say who's not included, and you can see there, if you're not charging, then you're not under this law. If you're working under, forest management or stewardship programs, especially that would cover anything that's, any kind of logging or harvesting operation is not under this law. Any kind of landscaping, and that gets a little wordy there about landscaping because there's some crossover. But we just used industry standard 12 feet for pruning and 6 inches for removal is probably sufficient to get rid of most areas of confusion. And then, there's some states that have done these laws and regulated the utility companies, but you can see on the 6th one there, I basically excluded public utilities. They already have a pretty robust safety program in place. And then the standard municipal or county workers are usually excluded from these kind of things for obvious reasons. That they do this kind of work either formally or on an ad hoc basis. So, should I just move on? Okay. All right. So, I did the best I could to be to be organized about this, but let me just give you before I go through it, let me just explain that the basic idea here is that the tree company has the license, and that the certified operator is the guy that's the one who's in charge of training everybody. And that person's got to pass a test, which is the same format that's been used in commercial pesticide applicators. It's a real simple system. You can't get a license unless you got a guy that's a trainer who can train your people. And it's impossible to do tree work, at least the general tree care part, without at least 3 people, because to cut a tree, you got to climb the tree, you got to hold a rope, and you got to cut the limb. So it always works in teams. In the unlikely event that somebody started a tree company and they wanted to work alone, then I guess they'd have to become a certified operator. But for the most part, we're talking about people working with teams. That's why you need a trainer. You need somebody who's responsible to do the training. So the whole format here, if you start to get a little confused about what we're doing, is we're just copying this proven format of having a licensee, that's the company, and then a certified operator who's a trainer who's passed the test and who's responsible to do all the training. So in any case, for licensing, I think it's reasonable to skip over procedures, but you can see there certified operators are a requirement of the license. So this whole section on licensing mostly deals with the certified operator, the guy doing the training. And then the next section, which is the responsibilities of the licensee, talks about the insurance and all the things that the business owner has to do. So that's kind of the way this works. So you can see there's 3 operators. We got general tree care operators, tree health care operators, and consulting operators. Obviously, a company could do all 3, and obviously, if a person was competent in all 3, you could have one guy that was doing all 3 as a trainer. So the next section is called license cost. This is the same exact fees that we did that is currently the law in the commercial pesticide applicators side. It's not very expensive to do this. As you can see, there's a few fees if you're late, sort of standard stuff here. Now there's an exam to be a certified operator, and the idea there is that this guy knows enough about the safety issues in our trade that he's at least able to show that he knows. Now, whether he's a skillful instructor or not, we're not going to get into all that, but at least that exam will make sure that certified operator understands the very basics of rigging tree limbs, the very basics of fall protection so people don't fall out of trees. They understand electrical hazards, and we'll get to all those trainings that are required in a minute. There's a few eligibility requirements, and you can see, that for the most part it has to be that you've done a little bit of this work. This is pretty standard where you can substitute a college education for some of the practical experience requirements. Usually it's not all, and we've definitely kept it where it's not all. And then if you want to be the operator for, spraying or consulting, then we've added in a requirement for explaining a couple of projects that you've done that show that you know how to manage disease or do consulting, and then an external certification. The vast majority of the operators are going to be doing tree trimming and removal, and they're not going to seek to be listed as a consultant. But if they do, then it's there. Like for example, most of the contractors that work for GDOT, probably they would just lean on the GDOT folks to do any consulting. They're just there to do the work. I would imagine that'd be the case for most. And most residential consumers, they just want tree work done. People don't normally hire a whole lot of consultants to do that. But the chemical application part is growing a lot in Georgia, and more people are realizing that they can take care of their trees without necessarily removing them or cutting them down, and it's more cost effective. So that's growing, and we'll see more of those in the state. So that section 7 is about the exam. Section 8, it'll be it'll be visible, and then section 9 talks about recertification every 5 years. That's the same time frame we've seen elsewhere. So that kind of outlines the knowledge base that the trainer needs to have at the company. And then the next section talks about the responsibilities of the licensee. The first one is insurance, and it is a little bit different for the different categories. So for general tree care and for spraying, you're going to need workers' comp and general liability. For consulting, you don't really need a workers' comp policy. For the most part, we replace that with a professional liability policy, or E&O. The insurance limits are very reasonable. Again, we want a law that allows really anybody to get into this business. I've talked to a lot of my insurance friends, and many of them believe that it'll actually drive down insurance costs in this state to do this, and it may be more affordable for people to start. Right now, if you want to start in Georgia, because there's so many fatalities and accidents in our industry, insurance rates are very high, sometimes as high as 60% of payroll, which is an astronomical amount of insurance to pay. So if you come in with no experience and you want to start a new business, then your options are really to pay a huge amount, which then you have to pass on to your customers, or in some cases, people neglect to insure their people properly. So insurance is a reasonable limit. Lapsing of insurance is important because some people just aren't good, honest players, and they'll, or maybe they're just broke. But in any case, sometimes insurance lapses can cause homeowners to be exposed to a lot of risk from a unscrupulous contractor. Okay, so the licensee, which means the tree company, has to designate their certified operator, and there's some rules there about what happens if you lose your certified operator, and not overburdening one certified operator with hundreds of employees that they're supposed to be overseeing. So I think that's pretty much the same format we've seen in the legislation that I modeled this on. If you go to number 6, the registering of employees, together with the next section, which is, I think, 6 and 7, yes. So 6 and 7 are very important because they get to the heart of the safety of the employees themselves. I've certainly seen in my 25 years that it is not sufficient to educate the owner and the general manager about how to avoid electrical hazards. They will not pass that on to every person in the field, or if they do, what they end up doing is just simplifying it to the point where it's useless. Like, be careful out there, George, those are power lines, right? And that doesn't save any lives. So we really believe that in order to do this, we have to hold the licensee accountable to do the training. So not only do they have to have a trainer, but they have to promise to train their people. And so this registering of employees is very important. It says the licensee shall be responsible for registering all of its non-certified employees. That means the ones that aren't trainers. And that you can't do business with an unregistered employee. So when you hire somebody, you gotta add that to your. So this is again copied straight out of commercial pest control. It's worked well. The only difference here is that instead of training the field guys on chemical use, this is all about safety. And you can read here. This is a laundry list of how people get injured and killed in the tree business. It says right here, the safety standards, knowing what the law is a good start. This act, knowing what the requirements in Georgia was a good start. But then we get into the real meat of it, right? Personal protective equipment, chainsaw operations and ground operations, including felling, tree climbing, fall protection, rigging, friction devices, chippers, bucket trucks, cranes, equipment, electrical hazards, motor vehicles and driving, and state and municipal requirements. So that's what will save lives and prevent people from causing a lot of property damage, increasing insurance rates, and so that'll be the requirements. The enforcement mechanism tends to be, it kind of plays out over time, where an operator that fails to do this eventually loses their license or gets into trouble. So we think over time we can really drive people to do the right thing, not right away. The licensee, which means the business owner's got to promise to do, these 10 hours. I probably train every one of my field employees about 35 hours a year. So 10 hours is really on the low end. But we could either increase it. Oh, sorry, it's 20 hours for general tree care operations. So, yeah, I'd probably do 30 or 40 hours a year for each field employee. And so 20 hours is on the low end of what you need to keep people safe. Okay, and then what was that next? Oh, that's for the health. Yeah, so for the tree health care operators, it's 10 hours. And there's another list of training that's there. That's very similar to the commercial pesticide applicators license in the sense that it has more to do with chemical stuff. You guys all right? Any questions so far? Okay. I apologize if what I'm doing isn't clear enough. But after we get through all that, then there's another list of requirements, that the licensee has to do. They got to issue cards. They expire and they have to be reissued. All right, so registering of subcontractors. So a huge problem in our industry is subcontracting of work. It's where you have a tree company that does the sales end. Maybe they got a nice website. But then when it comes to actually doing the tree work, they just hire it out to somebody else. And it also occasionally happens where a company's become really reliant on, or frankly, they just have undocumented workers, and then those workers become subcontractors. So there's a sort of a plethora of shady stuff that occurs. But in any case, number 7, registering of subcontractors will, without getting involved in any federal issues, will minimize these things by simply making it more difficult. I mean, the reason people use subcontractors is because it's cost efficient. So this will make it more difficult to just rely on subcontractors to do all your work for you. They would also have to be licensed. So by the time a subcontractor's gone through the trouble of getting a license, I feel most of them would probably just work for themselves. But this would not eliminate those loopholes. It would just minimize them in a way that I think is appropriate to do at the state level. This is all me. This is not copied based on anybody else's law. This is just me trying to write something that works for our industry. So take that with the understanding that I'm an arborist, not an attorney. So the commissioner's duties, this is just standard sort of verbiage related to how the commissioner is supposed to go about doing their job. It explains a little bit more who can be a licensee, and like, for example, a company can't be the certified operator. That's only an individual, right? We want a person in charge of safety. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Yes, sir.
The subcontractor, like, as I told you before, I own a tree service. And I don't own a crane, so a friend of mine owns a tree service and he has 2 cranes. So if I need a crane, I just sub the job out to him. Reading, I think it's section C, 3 days prior to the subcontractor performing work, submit a form registering with the subcontractor with the secretary. He does all my crane work, so would you want him to have to be registered every single job, or could I just register him for the year since he does all of it for me?
So if you read it, the intention says a subcontractor that performs a category of tree care operations. So this would not apply to subcontractors that do crane work. It would be where you hired somebody to do all your actual tree
Oh,
work.
that's what I'm saying. When I get a job like that, I just let him do the whole thing. My guys just focus on something else.
Yeah, so
Because
then
like,
if it's
rigging and
another
every crane and all that's a lot more than we just want to get into. So I just give him the whole job.
Yeah, we do that too if you want. but no, that would be what you would do is you would just use a contractor who's a subcontractor who's licensed.
I get that, and I'm fine with that. And I know he would get licensed or whatever. It's just section C. It says I have to 3 days prior to the subcontractor performing work, I have to register him as a subcontractor. Are you trying to get it to where he has to register for every job, or can I just be like, this is my subcontractor?
Oh no, it would be like the way that GDOT does it, or yeah, isn't that how you guys do it? Once you've got a contractor, then they're on your list.
Yeah, if they sub out work, then that sub has to meet a lot of the similar qualifications, or if it's a crane operator, they would have to be certified in that, but it'd be for that one scope on that job.
Yeah, so like an employee that's registered for, I think it says every 2 years, you have to redo that. So this would just be periodically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think I wrote anything in there about how often that gets redone.
It just said you have to do it 3 days before the job. I was just trying to see or to clarify in the future, so
Yeah.
we'll clarify that.
The intention there is that once you have a subcontractor and they're licensed, then you can just reuse them as many times as you want very easily.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we include it so it's easier in the future. I do it 3 or 4 times a year. Just doing it once a year makes it, or every 2 years makes it easier than.
Oh, yeah. Anything else? All right, so an important part of this is contracts and advertising. So this proposed set of rules talks a little bit about the marketing. This is again borrowed from the commercial pesticide applicator side, where there was a lot of problems where people would sort of hold themselves out as a knowledgeable practitioner, and they really weren't. So I don't know if you have any questions here. No claim of obligation. It's important to make sure that people can't go around saying that people have to do tree work or that they are under obligated. So that's in there. Contract clarity. This is a little different from the other laws, but it kind of speaks to the issues that we see in our industry. Just to, I don't know if I should go through each one of these, Victor? Okay, yeah. The basic idea behind contract clarity is to make sure that there's a general scope that everybody can agree on when it comes to tree removal, pruning, and consulting. That, you don't, when you sell removals, that you say what you're gonna remove. That's about it. if you do pruning, that you generally say what you're gonna prune and so forth and so on. And then the last one is bonding. So a lot of people go advertise that they're bonded, and bonding, as I'm sure you guys all know, has more to do, or usually has to do with the performance of an actual formal contract, a quote unquote performance bond. So this verbiage is just taken straight out of the other legislation. And it just makes sure that if somebody advertises themselves as bonded, then they actually have some sort of blanket bond, which of course nobody has. I don't have a blanket bond, but we do get bonded when we do individual projects, depending on the contract requirements. All right, and then lastly, guys, it just sort of this legislation ends up here with all the business of revocation, how the commission might go about investigating somebody that's not doing it right, and then the penalties. And if you look under penalties, it says they're injunction and crimes. And so the basic idea here is that if you're a repeat offender, and if enough years go by where you've repeatedly put people's property and lives at risk by failing to do any of this training, then you could eventually get in trouble, serious trouble. So that could include, I think, provided, you could get thrown in jail, I guess, in a theoretical sense. But the most common thing is that people don't want to lose that license because that's their livelihood. So I think that'll be just the right amount of pressure we need to move people to do the right thing. And then I wrote all the options that I thought were, potential changes we could make. Those are the last 3 pages. I can't remember this exactly. But I feel like it's not a good idea to go over the options, because this is probably the point where you guys take over, right? So they're there if you guys want to consider anything that's been rattling around in my head as the right way to do it.
Okay, thank you. Very, very comprehensive review of this proposal. Any additional questions on the part of the committee? All right.
Going back, there was one thing I saw, and it talked about, like, to solicit business, you have to be a certified tree care operator. So you want everyone who's a salesman to be a certified tree care operator and go through the safety training and all the continuing education?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just saw it in there, and it didn't seem to flow right, so I just wanted to make sure.
What I wrote was that for every 20 field workers, a company should have 1 certified operator.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be a salesperson. I know with my sales guys, I try to keep them away from operations and, just focus on selling. So.
Yeah, it's over here. It's like, no employee shall be allowed to solicit any business or engage in general tree care operations or tree health operations except in the presence of a certified operator.
Where does it say that?
It's Section 6 under responsibilities of the licensee, designated certified operator, employee, and secretary. It's
Section
fifth
6
line under
of
6.
licensees.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, unless they're under the direct. Oh, it should not say on-site there. Except if they are a certified operator or under the direct supervision of a certified operator. Well, okay, so the idea there is that there's a guy at the company that's a certified operator, not that he's there on site looking at you.
Okay.
And I don't know if that on-site came from, because the word on-site, it does not mean in this sense like we're in the same room together. It just means that that person's within a geographic range that's conducive to occasionally checking on people. Yeah.
Yeah, just like when a salesperson goes out in the field, I was like, some of this training may not be necessarily relevant for all the salespeople.
I admit that's unclear, and I promise you the intention there was that there's a certified person available within like, in other words, if the guy is in Kentucky, then we know he's not. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And there's other verbiage that just, it says in another section, it says like 100 miles, and if you're in excess of 100 miles, you have to go in front of the commission, explain how on earth you're supervising these people. So it definitely doesn't mean on-site, like we're here in the same backyard. Yeah.
Okay, Representative Lim?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure, so I get that the certified operator, they need field experience basically. And then any employee either has to be a certified operator or they need to go through all this training. Are you confident that the experience required to be a certified operator, because I'm thinking of like implementation, the moment this gets implemented, folks have to essentially be a certified operator. Are you confident that that 2 years of experience or the degree and the 1 year of experience would have included the safety requirements that you're putting on the employee?
It's a hard question and a great question. When I started, I knew nothing and made a lot of bad mistakes. I think that 2 years is a fair period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Just wanted to make sure that you felt that way.
Yeah, I do. I think it's fair. If it's too great of a period of time, then it becomes really hard for people to start their own businesses, get into business. And the larger issues are usually insurance and compliance, and so that's how I feel is that's fair.
Chairman Yura?
Thank you for being with us again. You mentioned that you developed this as kind of a model after the commercial pesticide industry. Are there particular states that have a similar regulations to this that you can point out?
Yeah, so there's a handful. The ones that actually do roughly what we're doing are New Jersey and Maryland. And both of them have seen substantial decreases in losses after it. I feel like this one is better because it's a little simpler and it doesn't have a requirement to become knowledgeable about arboriculture and become a certified arborist or anything like that. It's more focused on the operations. But both of those laws were successful.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions on the part of the committee? I will just make a comment, and you had mentioned this, and also Mr. Littleton mentioned this too, is one of the things that we're considering, and as a primary consideration of this committee, is that whatever direction we propose to recommend in our final report, we've got to make sure, if that happens to be something similar to this, a licensing structure and state regulated requirements, that it does not prohibit individuals from achieving the American dream, going into business for themselves, things like that. So this is a good comprehensive way to look at that, and appreciate the work that you and the folks associated with GFAST have put into this. So thank you.
Well,
I have one more question.
Sorry, I had a quick clarification question. So you also don't feel that there should be some exception, like if you're only doing this for $2,000 or less a year, that you wouldn't have to do this? Like that, you don't think that would apply in this context, basically? Like that kind of de minimis exception?
no, my thought is that if you do it for hire, then,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Thank you.
Hey, thanks to all of you guys for taking the time to consider our industry and the people that work in it. I'm really grateful. And thanks to all you guys too. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Could I make some additional comments?
Yes, sir. If you'd like to come to the microphone, Mr. Littleton, that'll be perfect. We're actually trying to work through getting a presentation for one of our next presenters through email, if we can work that out. So go right ahead.
This has to do with the arborist part of it. There are a lot of different types of arborists, and if you're an arborist that works for a tree service company, your job is to go out and advise that person on tree removals, whatever might be required, that company provides that service. There's also a lot of independent arborists out there that come back and review behind those contractors to determine if those measures that company recommended are sufficient. And like for an arborist, I pay $130 a year to be certified or registered with ISA. I pay $250 every 3 years to maintain the arborist certification. Every 5 years, I pay about $2,500 to be certified as a tree risk assessor. So just keep that in mind when you're putting the fees out there. But we need those independent arborists that are out there looking at things, and that not only is it just the tree stuff, but they do a lot of other things, tree health, soils, anything to help take care of trees. So in the requiring E&O insurance and things like that, that's putting a lot on those individuals to have to maintain that when they're not actually doing things that are at risk. Now, an arborist that works for a company is making recommendations, usually, yes, you need to take that tree out, or you need to prune this or that. So there is some difference in the actual arborists that are out in the market.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, let's see. All right, next on our agenda we have is Ms. Crystal McPherson from the Better Business Bureau. And we're working on getting a presentation. Has it come through on email yet? Okay, coming through on email, so not here yet. So we'll what we're going to do is we're going to step over to the next. I had conversation a couple of times with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner. Do we have someone here from the Office of the Insurance Commissioner yet? Okay, not here. They may be coming later. So with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Rusty Lee with the Georgians for a Safer Tree Industry if he would kind of come up and give us some follow-up to some of the discussion we had a couple of months ago in our original meeting. Rusty and I are social media friends, and let me tell you something. If there's somebody out there that's watching this industry and has concern for what's going on, he's standing at our podium right now. Rusty, I'll let you take it from there.
I appreciate it. Just to give a little bit of background on myself, since we've got some GDOT and Georgia Power guys here. I've been in the green industry. I put it this way, I had full set of hair when I started in this industry, so it kind of tells you. I think this is 35 or 36 years. My degree is in horticulture. I am a certified arborist. I'm a Georgia certified landscape professional. I carry 2 different categories for pesticide certification, several other certifications that aren't as specific to tree care. I was vice president with a large company, Downey Trees in Norcross, for 19 years. I was senior vice president with Gunnison Tree, COO with a company called AKA Tree. Many of these companies have sold out. Some are still in business. Some have sold out and maybe under different names now. Worked with a couple other different companies now. I work for a little smaller company, mostly doing residential tree work. We don't mess with any DOT stuff. We don't work with any Georgia Power stuff. I've got a tree right now that Georgia Power just, quote, made safe for us, and now we'll come in and finish it from there. Just a little bit of background on this, and to add to what Tiersten said, the original framework, the backbone to what we're proposing, actually, it wasn't actually Department of Ag. Well, it was Department of Ag. It wasn't pesticide. It was termite pest control, the interior side of it. 2012, I had a conversation with Terry England and Gary Black about the need to see a license. We were seeing accidents. We knew something needed to happen. Gary, played devil's advocate. Hey, why do you want more government in your life? And obviously nobody does, but we don't see any other way to police ourselves. And the accidents just keep going up. We are the most dangerous profession in the country. Last I heard, we were averaging 10 to 12 fatalities per month across the country. It was just a couple of months ago. We unfortunately had a streak in Georgia, about a 2-month streak. We had about 8 fatalities in Georgia. I think 1 was in Chattanooga. Everything else was in Georgia. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of truly how dangerous this is. Everything that we touch, obviously driving in Atlanta traffic is bad enough, but chainsaws can kill us, the chippers can kill us, the falling from heights or something from heights falling on us can kill us. The electricity obviously can kill us if we get too far or get too close or things go wrong. So everything we do is deadly. And as several people have said, currently, if you've got a pickup truck and a chainsaw and a case of beer, you're in the tree business in Georgia. So we knew something had to be done. When Gary, he said, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks, I thought I'd never hear from him again. His lawyer, one of the lawyers for the Department of Agriculture, is what created the original backbone using the termite pest control framework, since it was already underneath what I call their umbrella. And then he interjected in some little side notes from New Jersey, because New Jersey, as Tierson said, New Jersey's already got something like this in place. Louisiana is another state that has this, has a state license in place with some fairly rigorous CEUs required to keep your license in Louisiana. But we did have a conference call with the folks from New Jersey and basically just asked, are you seeing a reduction in accidents? And the overwhelming answer was yes, which is what our ultimate goal is. Again, we don't see any other way around it. We had a phone call May 2017. Another tree guy, I'm not going to say he's very reputable, but another tree guy called on a Saturday morning and said, hey, I need your lift. I said, what's going on? Why do you need it so bad? He said, I've got an emergency. I've got a climber, emergency rescue for a climber. By the time we got there, unfortunately, the guy had passed away. Tierson, he and some of his folks showed up. There was numerous tree care people on site, but it was all too late. Number one, DeKalb County was there, and once they start their rescue procedure, nobody else can help, at the time at least. So we were all just kind of there to be able to talk, and Tierson and I kind of agreed something's got to get done. So Tierson came on board, and we brought in some folks, Kevin Caldwell and a few other folks, to help get us to this point now. But seeing, a body hanging in a tree, going to the funeral, seeing his widow and his 4 children and the 2 little children crying on the grave. They just lost their dad for really no good reason whatsoever, just because it was improper training or no training whatsoever. None of the safety procedures that we all need to follow that have already been mentioned here, OSHA and ANSI guidelines, none of that stuff was followed, but somebody lost their life. So we said, at least I kind of drew a line in the sand and said, something's got to give. We've got to change this and turn it around. So that's just kind of the quick history of it, of how we got to this point. Is the license going to make everything better? And the day that it's, the day that the legislators sign off and say it passes, is it going to get better? No. I don't know how many years to wait to say we're starting to see a reduction in this. But we know something's got to happen. In one of the conversations when I was at Downey, I managed 4 offices in the Southeast, 2 in Atlanta, 1 in Destin, Florida, and 1 in Savannah. And a legislator who lived in the Landings, which was where my office was at in Savannah, I briefly talked to him about this, and he said, I like the idea. I want to see the legislation once it gets closer. I'd like to read it and look over it. And he point blank said, if I feel like you're going to be putting down my constituents, his voters, his constituents, then I'm going to vote no on it. In other words, if we make it too restrictive, and I love a lot of the ideas you guys have mentioned, putting a lot of training and stuff out there, but if we make it too restrictive, it's not going to pass across the street. So my idea was, we've got minimum coverage of insurance, we've got some training, we've got some CEUs, we've got a lot of things in there already. That's great. I'm hoping that we get it across the finish line. Then between working with the insurance companies, we can start to improve the overall safety. Because if Joe Blow wants to get his license and he gets it, he pays that fee, and he's got his minimum coverage of insurance now, my thought is that if he keeps having unsafe practices, accidents, claims and things like that, his insurance company is either going to raise his rates or they're going to drop him. And that was one of the things I learned about how the insurance companies work behind the scenes, is if Joe Blow loses company A and he goes to company B, he doesn't have to come out forthright and say, hey, we've lost our insurance, we need coverage. They already know that. There's behind the scenes that the insurance companies are talking, and they can see exactly why he lost his coverage. So it's going to behoove these guys to start saying, hey, maybe we need to start wearing PPE, the hard hats and the safety glasses and all that. Maybe we need to start doing tailgate safety meetings and start bringing in some trainers and start getting better. From when I started, there was a few really good reputable companies, and there was a whole lot of jacklegs that did everything wrong. We're seeing more and more smaller companies, whether it be single operator or small companies compared to the large guys here in Atlanta, that just driving by, you see them wearing chainsaw chaps, you see them wearing their PPE, and that's a huge step. So I think if we can get this across the finish line with whatever critiquing needs to happen without, making it too strict, without saying you've got to have a certified arborist on staff, you've got to have all the different training that some of these small companies can't afford or can't do, then, we'll bring in the safety from the backside by having the insurance companies work with these guys, have these trainers, make this more available. I'm a former president of the Georgia Arborist Association, and we definitely want to bring in GAA to help. They're already considered, they consider themselves an educational arm to our industry, and we want to improve that. We want to make education more available, and we already have Spanish classes. We want to emphasize that and push that out even more so that these companies that get the certification, get their license, they have somewhere to go. Because right now, there is no license. There's only, last time I checked, there was 5 colleges in the United States you can get a degree in arboriculture. The best way is either you get lucky enough to get on with a good company like Boutte and learn from the ground up, or you learn the hard way and you bang yourself around and you learn from making the mistakes and hope that you survive through those mistakes, because this industry is known to be pretty deadly. So, any questions I can answer from anybody?
Okay. Representative Ridley?
I have 2 questions. One, you talked about New Jersey and Louisiana, and you're talking about the representative you talked to who didn't want to make it too difficult on his constituents. Do you know what happened to tree pricing, like the industry pricing in Louisiana and New Jersey after the regulations went in?
That's not a question I've ever asked them, as far as how it affected the end user, or the homeowner. I've never asked that question. I would assume that if insurance rates come down, then everybody else's rates can come down some. Because right now we're paying astronomical insurance rates because of the danger of it. But that's not a question I've ever asked them.
All right, because I've heard in Louisiana it went up drastically. But again, Louisiana's not. New Jersey, I think, would be a more fair comparison than Georgia, because Louisiana is not like us. And my next question on the proposal on the registering of employees, and you talked about you're doing training in Spanish and stuff now, and we all know there's a huge illegal immigrant, undocumented migrant workforce in this industry. When they have to get registered with the state, we're going to allow them to register the illegal immigrants, or are we going to drive them out the industry? And again, we drive them out the industry. You drive down the street, sometimes half the crews are Hispanic and may not be legal. So again, you're going to drive up that rate. And again, passing a bill that says we're letting illegals work in the state here, I don't think will work either.
Right. And Kirsten's he's fluent Spanish, so he can definitely tell you probably more than I can.
But the intention of this law is not to deal with immigration.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're not really trying to deal with that issue.
No, I get that, but when you're having to when you're employing undocumented migrants, illegal immigrants, and you're having to register them with the state, some are going to be afraid to register. Some companies aren't going to register them, or we just register and keep a list of who's undocumented. It's just going to happen because the industry is so loaded with undocumented migrants, illegal immigrants, and that's going to become an issue with this bill going forward if it comes forward and comes to the House next year. And we're in the study committee, so I'm trying to prevent that.
Yeah, and we've never really discussed that. There's a lot of those 8 that were fatalities. A lot of those were Hispanics. We know the Hispanic population is huge in our industry.
About a quarter of our members are business owners that are Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
I
a lot
think
of
the main goal here is to increase safety in the industry and not really to address the issue.
That's the one thing that really shocked me is a lot of the Jafasti meetings we've had around the state, some of it being for fundraisers. Usually at least half or sometimes the majority of the companies there were Hispanic-owned companies. And it was kind of shocked me that they were some of the biggest supporters that we've got. So, but yeah, I don't know that's something we've not discussed as far as illegal. We just kind of figured that that's got its own thing, and we're just looking from the tree care side.
And I understand it. I appreciate, trying to make it safer. Again, just with it being such a high population in this industry,
Right.
it's going to become an issue.
Right. And maybe something we have to have more discussion on, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Representative Lim?
I had a quick question. Well, first to respond to that comment, I think all of the laws regarding E-Verify would still apply. Whether people agree with that or not, that's the case. But my question is, to stay with the employee, with particularly section, the registration of employees, the issuance of a new card, it sounds like you would not allow an employee to, like in the OSHA context, you get the 10-hour card or the 30-hour card. You would not issue a card unless they're employed. Is that correct? That they've completed the classroom training?
That's a little bit of a gray area, but my understanding is that the employer would be obligated to provide the training. And that there could be an employee who's employed who hasn't received all of it yet.
Gotcha. And I understand that. I suppose my question is getting to the fact that, I personally want the employees that have completed the training to be able to show that they have the training next time, even if there's a gap in their employment. And I'm wondering how that's kind of being tracked, because the way that I'm reading this, and I understand I could be wrong, it's an employee registration card, meaning you get it while you're employed and get the classroom training. And I'm just making sure that there's a way to port that, even if someone isn't immediately re-employed in the industry. I'm thinking from the OSHA context, where the OSHA card stays with the employee and isn't employer dependent.
My personal opinion on that would be that the training should be transferable. It belongs inside the head of the employee if they deserve it.
Right. Well, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the part of the committee? And this is good conversation, and will come into play if somebody picks this up to run with it. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Okay, I believe we just had a couple of folks from the Insurance Commissioner's office come in. If y'all would like to come to the podium and introduce yourselves, and
would it be all right if we sat at the table since there's two?
Absolutely, yes, please do.
Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to thank you guys for this opportunity for allowing us to speak on this issue. My name is Bryce Rawson, Director of Government Affairs for the Georgia Department of Insurance. To my right here, with the slightly fuller beard, is Jeremy Betts, our Executive Counsel. He is here to assist me with any technical questions you guys may have for our agency. Interactions between tree care companies and the Department of Insurance are typically few and far between. Our most common interaction with this group of folks, and I apologize, we don't have the exact correct terminology. Most of our interactions occur in the post-disaster mitigation and recovery efforts. Just over a month ago, as many of you are aware, Hurricane Helene completely devastated several communities across our state. Many residents have been unable to return to their homes due to the extensive damage to their property. As the #1 forestry producing state in the nation, it is unsurprising that a large part of that damage was the result of trees damaging homes, trees damaging property, and vehicles. While consumers heavily rely on tree removal specialists, we've noticed a concerning trend during disaster mitigation. Immediately after a storm, our state receives a quite large influx of out-of-state contractors. While most of these individuals are acting in good faith, there are some bad actors who look to take advantage of consumers during their most vulnerable time. To illustrate this point, I'd like to provide some simple anecdotes from consumers. Immediately following Hurricane Helene, our office set up a catastrophe claims village. We set one up in Augusta, in Valdosta, and in Vidalia, some of the hardest hit communities in our state. And at these claims villages, we bring insurance companies to a central location, companies that most consumers have, so are kind of our top 10, to a central location so these consumers can interact with their insurance companies. They can file a claim on site, ask any questions they may have with their insurance companies, just so it's a little bit easier for consumers immediately after a storm. At these villages, we heard some startling complaints from consumers regarding tree care companies. In Augusta, we had one consumer who had a tree unfortunately fall on one of their trailers. That consumer was quoted nearly $40,000 for the removal of a tree off of a trailer that wasn't worth nearly half that much. In Valdosta, another consumer notified us that his elderly parents were pressured into a $15,000 tree removal that should have only costed half that much. And those are just two of the many stories that we hear at these claims villages. And these bad actors typically follow the same patterns. So they go door to door soliciting their services. They use high pressure sales tactics to get consumers to sign a contract right then and there. And some even claim to have endorsements from certain agencies like FEMA or GEMA when these agencies certainly do not endorse these individuals. And what we encourage consumers to do immediately after a storm is to work with local contractors who they know and trust, who are members of their community. And to also receive several quotes from a number of companies as well. Doing so helps consumers get the best price and protects them from getting scammed. And while not directly related to the licensing or training suggestions that this committee has previously heard so much about, we appreciate the consideration that you all have shown towards it in this situation. And with that, I know these remarks were fairly brief, but I understand that you guys will likely have some questions for our department on this topic. And so we're more than happy to open that up for a conversation.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the part of the committee? I have a couple of questions just related to the circumstance you've mentioned with the most recent health or weather situation we had. In previous experiences or in other situations like this, have you encountered a situation where something has been done to improve the situation? I'm looking for potential solutions here, something that maybe the office and the department has looked at in the past and said, well, when this happened, these improved. Can you think of any experiences like that?
Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the time. Again, my name is Jeremy Betts. I'm Executive Counsel to the Commissioner. I think the one thing that our department has the power to do currently, and what we will continue to do, hopefully in a very long time from the next time we have one of these hurricanes, is that public education of what Mr. Rawson spoke to, of working with trusted members of your community, getting multiple bids, and having somebody who is not, as the commissioner would say, fly by night. And that's what been the one thing that we've seen help drastically push down the number of difficult claims. I think maybe would be the way I would describe those. And so, you know, we from the department certainly are concerned about fraudulent claims during that time period. And so if it's your neighbor or somebody that you've known for 10 years, you're far less likely to put them into a bad position and overcharge them and potentially end up with the homeowner owing more than the homeowner's policy would end up paying. So that's from where we stand now under the current state. That's what we would suggest going forward.
So just to kind of summarize that, education.
Yes, sir.
Really, public education, consumer education on how to determine what you're getting.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
If I may add on to that for just one
Yes,
second. I
please.
apologize, sir. One big piece of the education that we did see, as you know, Valdosta has been hit before by storms. So what we saw, so I was actually at our Valdosta Claims Villages. Jeremy was in the Augusta Claims Village. And what we saw, two completely different results. Just because Valdosta had already been hit before. A lot of those consumers already knew what steps they needed to take. They've already worked with a lot of these contractors, so they had folks that they could trust. That simply was not the case in Augusta, and that's what they did have a little bit of a slower recovery process. Not for a lack of trying. They did a wonderful job over there. We'd certainly praise all the authorities in the Augusta area who did work on that. But there is just that education piece. It is fairly critical, and especially just getting ahead, knowing who you can work with.
Okay, thank you. Anyone?
Like you were talking about with the hurricane, I mean, and it may be more of a question for the GFAST, however you pronounce it, the tree people. When we had the fly-by-night contractors come into Georgia and the tree companies, like I know people who go to Florida, Alabama when the hurricanes come. When they come here, like, does the insurance commissioner or the state of Georgia, and you may not know, when those other companies come here, do we allow reciprocal licensing? Or, well, there's only 6 other states or 7 states that do it, none of them around us. Like, we're gonna have to create, I guess, something with the insurance commission for when those companies do come into the state, because I don't think anybody in South Georgia wants to wait an extra 2 or 3 weeks when they have a tree on their house and it's leaking to make sure they can't, reputable companies from out of state can do it and keep those fly-by-night contractors away.
Mr. Representative, I think you're exactly right. There are steps that have to be taken, and whether this is with the Department of Insurance or whether you find another agency to house the licensure program for this, there can be steps taken, and there's plenty of evidence that can work. We have a provision that allows for our adjusters, which, I mean, we work solely on the insurance side, but we do have emergency, during the times of a major declaration, a property adjuster or a crop adjuster is oftentimes what's called in. And they're given basically a temporary permit that is based upon their home residence state. Now, on our side, adjusters across the board are licensed or at least registered with the state, as may be the case for us. And so there is a bit of an ease there. I think you could probably look at some of the other trades to see how that may be completed within the state and our surrounding states.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate what your office has done, and thanks to the commissioner. All right, we've been going for about an hour and 45 minutes or so. We're going to take about a 5-minute break, give the committee members a quick break, and we're going to see if we can work out a presentation for our last presenter today. We've got a presentation for the Better Business Bureau. This is a part of the charge of our study committee is looking at consumer protection issues as well as safety in the industry. So we're going to dive into that a little deeper too. If y'all bear with us for about 5 minutes, thank you.
Okay, I think that there was, like, I don't know if that was connected to the microphone. I don't know if that's much. I think you're good to go.
Hey, doing good.
Just to remove sound, but it's fine if sound doesn't come through. Okay. It's just a little video, but it's fine. No, I was standing. Right here.
Who you working with?
Sometimes the window works, sometimes it doesn't, so I'm
Catch up with me, give me your number.
So I'll check first, and hopefully it works. I think my battery's missing. It's brand new and I forgot to put a battery in. But I think that if I'm standing here, I could just click it myself. Yeah. So I just thought about that.
The other two guys wanted to present from there because there were two of them and they wanted to be able to, you know, kind of pass the word.
Totally fine.
If you want to go from here, we're trying to.
It's fine.
Trying to get a screen down on the other side. So through the presentation, if we're not successful in that, we're going to move. So coming out. If we do that, I'll move the numbers down here. I'll just stick two screens.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Hey, I am flexible.
You have,
Thank
listen,
you
you
for
have
being
to.
flexible with me today because I can't iPhones and I can't find parking and it was right there in front of me and you just didn't see.
Absolutely no problem. And thank y'all for making the effort.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is Kate.
I mean, you know, that's kind
Okay, I think we're about ready to get started back. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Crystal McPherson from the Better Business Bureau. And Crystal, if you want to introduce yourself and proceed.
Well, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. This great opportunity to show you what we see every day, especially today in the tree industry. And so one of the things, well, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I've been with Better Business Bureau for 10 years, and I've had a front row seat to some of the things that we're going to talk about today. As seeing the complaints and reviews and things like that coming in for tree industries that are companies that are not so ethical. So there are definitely ethical tree care industry or tree care service companies out there, but we see so many that consumers are getting wrapped up in the non-ethical tree care industry. So let me start. So we do offer the insights of what customers are looking for in trustworthy businesses. So organizing a tree service company around these principles can increase customer trust and credibility. Let me switch my screen here. So providing well-structured, clear contracts, things that I've actually had conversations with businesses about. When contracts are not clear to a customer, it can either put the business in a predicament, or it also could put the consumer in a predicament. So things like, oh, I thought you were going to clean up the debris after you cut down my tree, or I thought you were going to go all the way to this stump. So clear contracts, we've expressed that to businesses, how important that is. So detailed written estimates align with consumer expectations and also shows professionalism. And this approach can prevent contract-related issues like unfulfilled cleanup promises. If any changes arise, we would suggest to the company to amend that contract. If things are seen in a contract that normally a consumer would be confused about, or you've seen it over and over in business, then it's best for the business to even have the consumer initial that so that they are aware of those things that may arise. Oops, sorry. Another thing that is important is, and we've seen this with those businesses that are not so ethical, is pay me up front, and then I'll do the job, and then the job's incomplete, the job's not to the satisfactory of the consumer. So the Better Business Bureau would suggest having flexible payment options, have that milestone payment, so put down a deposit. Once you put down the deposit, then you've delivered the services, and now you can collect more money. Or if the customer is asking for add-ons, then that is something that you would add on to the contract, we would suggest, because therefore maybe you did the add-on and then they were like, I didn't agree to that. We have seen this in several reviews and complaints. We can't take sides. We can't say the consumer is telling the truth. You can't say the business is telling the truth. Maybe the consumer is just trying to get free services. So it's protecting the business by having all that in a contract, even if you have to readjust the contract. Super important to be properly licensed and insured. That is something else that we have seen with these types of businesses, is that consumers are sending in complaints saying, hey, I had this person come to my house, I've got damage to my house, they're not insured, and now I'm struggling with my own insurance company to cover it. It puts the customer at ease when they realize that the people that are working there have insurance on themselves too, just in case there's someone hurt. Last thing they want to think about is their homeowner's insurance having to pay for that. And then subcontractors. A lot of times people don't think about subcontractors, but they need to have the same kind of credentials too as they're working with a company. So integrity and reputation management. So sorry. One of the things that we see is high pressure sales tactics. We have to do this or this, and we want to charge you all this money. And that is one thing that clients are very aware of pressure tactics. So maintaining a straightforward and honest approach can distinguish a business as trustworthy. And then online reviews and transparency can also help a business in this industry. Consumers are advised to look at the BBB profile for businesses when they call in, but also to check out all other platforms to make an informed decision. So not just at bbb.org, but Google, Yelp, all those places they can check out a business just to make sure that they've investigated all that the business can do for them. Another thing that we've seen is with industries specific, they will come and say they're cutting down a tree. Well, I can build a deck for you, or I can do this. I can redo your house and all these things. Maybe some of that requires a general contractor's license. And so now they're doing extra services for the client because they've grown up learning how to do that. And now they found themselves in a pickle because they are not qualified to do those things according to Georgia state laws. Oh, I do want to mention one more thing about this. Sometimes, so reviews and complaints, it's really good to look at complaints not as a negative always, but always look at it as a opportunity to help the business. The business should look at that as an opportunity to grow and take the customer's feedback to improve. So here's some stats regarding complaints with the tree care industry. Non-accredited businesses, 82% of the, let me make sure I read this correctly, I'm so sorry. Stats in 2023, there were a total of 571 complaints related to tree care services across the United States. Georgia accounted for 20% of all tree care complaints within the entire BBB system nationwide. 20% of complaints involve BBB accredited businesses in Georgia, which generally work towards resolution, showing accountability and customer care. 82% of complaints come from non-accredited businesses, which are often unresponsive to BBB efforts to mediate and assist customers with issues. Now, the thing is that not all non-accredited businesses are unethical, right? Just means they didn't join BBB. But when I looked at some of the complaints, most of them were non-responsive. Customers were out thousands of dollars. They wanted, the debris removed. The debris wasn't removed. The business promised to come back to, clear up some things, or they paid for the tree stump to be removed, and then the tree stump was not removed. Other businesses paid, the consumer paid thousands of dollars, and the business said, we'll be back tomorrow, and never showed back up. So there really is an issue when it comes to trying to be an ethical business, and you have the scammers that we're not supposed to really call them scammers, but you have the businesses out there that aren't doing right by consumers, that are taking away the business for the other ethical business owners. And I guess I should have changed my screen here. So the issues we've seen mainly are services, additional damages done. The tree fell on my house, my fence was damaged. Lots of damage happening with the service issues that we've seen. And then contracts, just not clear, debris not removed, the payments, as we discussed earlier, and just the service scope, like the consumer not really knowing what they're paying for, or they thought they were paying for one thing and they weren't. Sorry. So by consumers researching and finding trustworthy tree care companies, they can have greater assurance of professionalism, accountability, and commitment to resolving issues. Again, clear contracts and payment terms, educating the industry on the industry needs to be educated on the importance of transparent contracts that outline all services, including the cleanup and follow-up, as I said earlier. This can reduce misunderstandings and build trust. Requiring upfront payments only with stages of payments for bigger projects or upon completion can protect consumers from incomplete services. I know I've said that already, but it's important. That's what we keep seeing. Industry accountability and communication by maintaining open lines of communication, letting the consumer know step by step what's going on with the process. If they have questions or if there's rain and they can't come back for a couple days, they need to make sure that they're communicating that. This can significantly improve customer satisfaction. Responsive businesses are more likely to build long-term relationships and enhance their reputations. And then training and standards for safety and quality, implementing training on safe practices and standardized procedures for tasks like tree removal can prevent property damage and ensure quality service, ultimately protecting consumers. So here's the 8 standards for trust. And these are the things that in our personal lives that if you're an ethical person, you're following those. So in business, it's no different, right? You want to treat people the way you want to be treated and build that trust and know that they can count on you to do the job that you were set out to do. So to improve consumer protection in the tree care industry, businesses should aim to identify themselves as a trustworthy company and continue to adhere to ethical practices. Our local BBB receives over 100 phone calls each day from consumers looking for or checking out businesses. And like I said earlier, we're always encouraging them to look for the trustworthy companies. Ours, of course, have that seal there. They go through an extensive background check before we ever make them accredited to make sure that they are, in fact, a reputable company and a trustworthy company. We were founded over 100 years ago on strong ethical principles, and we remain dedicated to promoting trust in the marketplace. And our organization is funded by businesses that are committed to upholding these values and want to be recognized as trustworthy companies. So remember, BBB is here to support anyone, partners, businesses, consumers. We're here for, we have resources, we can give guidance, and we also can show you the accreditation process at any time. These are to help businesses uphold ethical practices and succeed in the marketplace. And I guess we're down. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak today. Hopefully I gave you a valuable information that you didn't know before, or maybe I confirmed some of the things you already knew. Does anyone have questions?
Thank you. I have a question. First of all, I just want to make sure I didn't mishear this. When you were going over some statistics earlier, you said something like 500 and some odd complaints in 2023 nationwide. And did I hear that 20% of those were in Georgia?
Yes. 20% in Georgia, yes.
Okay.
Make up the 571, yes.
Okay. Is there, do you know of anything that would cause that number from Georgia to occur? I mean, have y'all looked at that?
I have not looked at
Okay.
that. That is something that I could delve into. Maybe we just have a lot of trees over here. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. We do. In Georgia, we do.
We do.
So, yeah.
And hopefully we don't have a lot of people that are unethical in Georgia. So, like, you know what I'm saying? Maybe could be it too, right?
Right, and that's true. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the part of the committee? Okay. Thank you.
Hopefully
I'm
the-
sorry.
go ahead.
Representative Lim.
Yeah, just if you know the 80-20, the 80% non-accredited, do those tend to be smaller businesses? Do you have any idea of maybe they're
Yes,
likely or smaller than the 20%, which are likely larger?
Yes.
Is that a safe assumption?
Small businesses. Is that what you're asking
Yes.
me? Yes, because I did take out like big businesses in there.
Gotcha.
Like when I looked up tree care industry, Home Depot showed up because they do like stuff with that. So I took them out of the equation because we all know we are the headquarters for Home Depot, first of all. And so there would be a lot of complaints lodged because of all of them coming to Georgia, Atlanta for the whole United States. So that was one I took out of there. So yes, they would be smaller businesses. And when I looked at their accredited businesses, they all work to, have a resolution.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
So hopefully I gave you guys great information, and that's why you have no questions. Or it could be the opposite, right?
Actually, this was very good.
Yeah,
Like I said,
you loved
this,
it. Okay, good. I
Pri-
just wanted
prior
make
to your
sure.
presentation, we brought up the point that that one of the primary focuses of this study committee is not just safety for the workers in the industry, but also safety and protection for our consumers. So
That's
thank
right.
you. Thank you very much.
Yes, hand in hand in repeat business, right?
No,
Take care of your
correct.
customers. They take care of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, and that is all of the scheduled testimony we have for today. I did want to invite one other individual to come up to the microphone, and this guy has a special place in my heart, or at least somewhere. It's my predecessor, Mr. Terry Rogers, former state representative for District 10, who is now working in the hallways down here, and just to kind of wrap us up with a couple of closing remarks.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to rehook this back up. So sorry. I don't know. Do y'all need this anymore? You don't? Okay. Perfect. So sorry.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let me say that, well, it's really funny to be on this side of the thing, but the guy that's chairing your committee is the most important guy in the House, as far as I'm concerned, so y'all take care of him, because I don't want anybody trying to make me go back after this thing if something happens to the guy. Thank y'all for what you're doing. We started this thing a couple of years ago, and I handpicked Victor, too. I said, I said, I've got some people that, first of all, I'm Terry Rogers, and the name of my company is Rogers Strategies. I did serve 10 years in the House. But when I came to represent Chief Asty, they said, well, can we find somebody that you trust to do this? I said, yeah, you got a new guy there that's great. And Victor gets it, in spite of the fact that he graduated from Georgia Tech. He is very analytical, and he puts things in place. And yeah, they really look good. And by the way, the best comment of this whole committee hearing today was Representative Ridley when he said, "We're not Louisiana." I think we have unanimous consent on that. But we started talking about this, and I want to reiterate just two quick things. One is that this affects every district, both on the House and the Senate side in the state of Georgia. There's not a county, not a district that's not affected by this thing. You have incidents that happen. Victor and I both live in Habersham County, and we got to talking about this, and we can name about 5 different people that we know in the last 10 years that have died in our county with tree accidents. And these are people that were pretty doggone good at what they did. But it's a very, very, very dangerous industry. And I'd like to thank the Better Business Bureau, if she left. But I think that the point that was made, 20% of all the complaints that they received came from the state of Georgia. And I think that that's something that you guys probably, that gives you the justification right there for what you're looking at. That's a huge number. So this is not about regulation. This has come up a couple of times. And that's one of the things that Victor and I talked about from the start, and we tried to get the message across to people. Rusty and Tierson have done the same thing. This is not about regulation or over-regulation. Nobody wants that. And there was, the first year that we did it, there was some concern about that. People were concerned about, well, this is just more regulation. And I'm not gonna name the person because he's a very close friend. He was a representative, and he was looking into it. And he said, I just don't see that we need this. And then the next year he was back and said, we had a couple of people die in my district. And he said, that brings it home. So this does impact your district. And so it's very important. But I want to close it out with this right here. I want to go back to the original purpose of this thing. It's about safety and protection. That's what it's all about. It's not over-regulation. It's all about safety and protection. Safety, not just for the tree care workers, but safety for the consumer, and protection, both financial protection, business protection, all the way down the line. So I think that if you keep that in mind, don't worry about the regulation. It'll take care of itself. But if we can get us to the point of where we're thinking about this, we're trying to keep people safe, and we're trying to financially guard, the pocketbooks of the consumer. I mean, you've all heard the horror stories. So there's an older lady there or something that she's got a tree that she knows that is really causing a problem or whatever. So she calls a reputable company who comes out there and explains to her that, but it's going to take this and a crane and this and that or whatever. And she gets the price of $3,000 or something, and she's on a fixed income, and she says, I don't know, I've got to think about this. I don't have that type of money. And then somebody tells her, oh, well, my nephew's got a chainsaw and he cuts down trees all the time. So the guy comes over, and the next thing you know, you got a tree on the house, or you got a tree on the garage, or you got a tree on her car or whatever, and all she sees are the taillights going down there. So this is about safety and protection for the consumers. It's about safety and protection for the industry. And I know you guys have got a big job, but I really appreciate all the hard work that you guys have put into it. I know you've done a lot of studying and everything, and Chief Asti stands ready to help and offer it any type of information or advice you need. And just thank you for the job you do. And I'm going to be seeing most of y'all probably within the next couple of months. But have a great session. It's one of the greatest experiences of my life. I've made some of my best friends here, and you guys have a great session. So thank you for what you do. Appreciate you. Any questions? I don't think so, but
Thank you, Terry.
Great. Thanks, Victor.
All right. Any closing comments on the part of the committee? Seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.